In 1994, my friend Liz Carlin wrote a column for the New York Times called "What Shall I Wear to Work?" It focused on why a physician would need to wear a bulletproof vest. And today, for the first time in 8 years, I thought about my vest again. On March 10, 1993, Dr. David Gunn was shot and killed in Pensacola, Florida. We were naive. We thought there was a lone, crazy man out there who was acting alone. And as a result, I got up in a vigil in the front of the federal building in Seattle with my then 5-year-old baby in my snuggly and talked in front of a crowd. Now my baby is in the crowd at age 16, and it saddens me deeply that the violence against abortion providers and clinics continues. I began providing abortions in 1991. When I went to my first National Abortion Federation meeting, I felt like I'd found my colleagues, my professional home. At that time, Dr. George Tiller was already very well known in the field. One of the elders, I thought. Then as now, George was larger than life in the field. One couldn't hope to meet a more kind, caring, and gentle man than George Tiller. George has been providing abortions in Wichita, Kansas since the early 1970s. George learned about his father's abortion practice when he took over his dad's family medicine office after his parents' death in a small plane crash. A patient came to him and asked him if he would do abortions like your dad used to do. So George fell into doing abortions, and then he quietly made it his life's work. He never sought out attention for what he did, and in spite of being revered in the reproductive rights community and by his patients, he remained down to earth, his ego intact. It was never about him. It was about the women and doing what was best for them and trusting those women to make the best decisions they could about their own lives. Trust women was one of his many mantras. For those of you who will never have the pleasure of meeting George Tiller personally, I would like to share with you an email I received yesterday from a woman who worked with me at Aurora Medical Services before heading off to medical school 6 years ago. Hi, Deb. I just read about George Tiller's death. It was terribly sad for me. I remember hearing him speak at the Medical Students for Choice conference I attended right before I started medical school. What he said was so powerful to me. I was nervous, but I approached him and sat down to tell him how much I appreciated what he had said. I actually got choked up and started crying. He grabbed my hand and held it for a long time to calm me down. He said that he appreciated what I was saying and that if I ever needed anything that I should call him or email him. I asked if I could come do a rotation at his clinic, and he said it was probably not a good time to do it until I was more advanced in my training. I have been holding that card ever since, waiting to have the moment in residency to hopefully do an elective with him. Now it is too late. It is such a loss. Dr. Tiller was harassed virtually every day since I've known him, and probably for about 2 decades before that, and yet the adversity never affected his work. He never seemed to feel resentment or self-sacrifice. He gave each woman the compassionate care she so deserved. When I last talked to Dr. Tiller at the end of April, a jury had just acquitted him on charges of violating Kansas's late-term abortion laws. Within 24 hours of his acquittal, anti-abortion activists again filed similar charges against him. I asked him how he was holding up in face of the continued harassment. He said, "Deb, I had planned to retire at 60. I'm now 67. I can't retire until this is over." I asked if he had any idea when this might end. He said, "I am no longer in control of my life. They are." I don't think either of us had any idea the kind of control they would end up taking. So for me, besides the enormous loss of losing a friend and a mentor, I must also lose my denial. I have allowed it to color my life for the past 11 years. No doctors have been killed since Dr. Bart Slepian was gunned down in his home in front of his family in 1998. We became complacent. Young doctors were suddenly more willing to become abortion providers. Yet now, the violence continues. It is so convenient for those on the other side to say they condemn this action, yet their hostile rhetoric has helped create the atmosphere we are living in today. They tried to take Dr. Tiller down by changing the laws in the state of Kansas. They failed. They tried to take Dr. Tiller down by charging him with not upholding the laws of Kansas. They failed. Their rhetoric finally led someone to find a way to take Dr. Tiller down. The loss is enormous. This attack is so personal. It is an attack on my profession, my integrity, my friend. Yet today and each day, as I go to work, I will think of George Tiller. I will continue to try to connect personally with each patient, as I imagine George would do. To quote another colleague, he was the most wonderful and enlightened provider for so many years. Standing in the trenches day in and day out, Dr. Tiller walked the walk with such grace that to be in his presence was a blessing. He will be missed. So one of the amazing things about George Tiller is that his patients truly adored him. And to speak to that, one of his patients called NARAL first thing this morning and said, "Please, can I speak?" So I'd like to introduce to you Rose Manier.
12 years ago this week, which is kind of especially eerie timing for me, I went and became a patient of Dr. Tiller's. On my 17th birthday, I had been raped and became pregnant from that incident. And through, I think, not uncommon welter of emotions, including shame and despair and fear and just simple confusion, I hid my pregnancy for about 4.5 months. And it took me a long time to finally talk to a friend about it. And through another few weeks of soul searching, I came to the decision that I would really like to have an abortion and that that was the right choice for me. At the time, there were only 2 places in the country you could go, and Dr. Tiller's clinic in Kansas was one of them. And so I chose to go there. And you were there for about a week, and what seemed like an unimaginable amount of that time was spent actually with Dr. Tiller, and as well as with the rest of his staff. And my whole experience there was, unimaginably emotional, but looking back, the main emotion that I remember from it was a sense of safety and a feeling of acceptance and a feeling of respect. From the first moment that you step in the door, they treat you as an adult who has made a choice, and that they're there to support you, and that their role was never to judge you or never to try and talk you out of it, but also not to push you into anything. That was one of the things that the protesters would say to us as you went in the morning was, "You're being forced into this." And it was the whole point of the clinic was to make sure that they sat and talked with you and led you to make sure that it was really your choice, and just to make sure that that was your option. And that was what Dr. Tiller was all about, was supporting people in their own right and their own choices. One of the main things that he said several times to me that has stuck with me is that he viewed his role as a doctor in mainly that he gave women their lives back. Everyone who was there everyone who was there for a reason. No one was there like, oh, this will be a fun place to hang out for a week. Everyone was there for a real reason. And he believed that for some people the right choice is to have a child, but sometimes that's not the right answer. And that he was there to make sure that any woman felt safe and secure and respected in that choice. And he was amazing that way. In a time of medicine when a lot of insurance companies and clinics make sure that you only get a brief glimpse of a doctor, he gave you as much time as you could want. And, he was totally willing to take a sobbing 17-year-old and just hold her for half an hour while she cried and say, "It's going to be okay. It's going to suck for a while. This is going to be hard, but it's going to be okay. You made a choice, and I'm here to support you in that. And I know that you've come to this honestly, and this is important." And he was an amazing man, full of compassion and full of just respect for what he did and for every single person he saw. And you never felt, I think one of the most important things was never feeling in the least bit judged. And I think that that was where my own personal healing started that day, was in having someone that said, it's okay, And I think that he was incredible that way, and he's going to be very sorely missed. But I think his lesson and his spirit will live on in every doctor and every patient and every supporter who supports that same right.